It is not the introversion alone. It is the combination of intensity without expression, of depth without visibility, of truth without audience. Okay. And yet, this is also where the power lies. Okay. Because history shows us that when intuitive introverts are allowed to follow their inner vision without shame, without interruptions, they create revolutions of thought. They write sacred texts. They discover new scientific frameworks. They speak truths others are too afraid to utter. But first, they must survive the world that misunderstands them. And that is what we will explore next. To truly grasp the weight of this hidden curse, we need to move from history into the architecture of the mind itself. Because being an intuitive introvert is not just a lifestyle or a personality, it is a neurological, emotional, and spiritual design. Carl Jung was the first to formally define introversion and intuition as fundamental psychological functions. For Jung, introversion is not shyness, it is the direction of psychic energy inward. It is a mode of being that finds meaning not through action or reaction, but through reflection. Now add intuition to this foundation, and something rare emerges. In Jungian terms, intuition is the function that sees with the third eye. It processes the world through symbols, impressions, abstract connections, and possibilities. It is not about what is it is about what might be, what lies beneath, what echoes across time. It's what happens when a person primarily orients inward and uses intuition as their primary way of understanding reality. Okay. They begin to live in a world that others do not see. Their mind does not stop at the surface of events. It moves into the patterns, the archetypes, the energies behind the moment. A single conversation can trigger an entire mental journey. A glance, a word, a pause, all carries meaning. The intuitive introvert is like a human radar for invisible truths, but no one else hears the signal. Okay, this is where modern psychology adds another layer. According to studies in neuroscience, introverts have more activity in the brain's frontal lobes, the seat of deep thought, planning, and empathy. Their dopamine response is more sensitive, meaning they find pleasure in subtle internal experiences rather than loud external stimulation. Too much noise, too much attention, too much surface interaction, it drains them. Socially, this becomes problematic in a world that rewards the opposite. Extroverted sensing types, those who act quickly, speak confidently, and respond to the obvious, are celebrated. They are fast, clear, engaging. Meanwhile, the intuitive introvert may take longer to form a thought, may hesitate to speak, may go quiet when the conversation gets too shallow. But their silence is not ignorance. It is processing. It is depth. And yet, they are often judged for not being outgoing enough, for being too intense, for overthinking everything. But this is not a choice. It is the way the nervous system is wired. They are not reacting slowly. They are reacting deeply. And in a culture obsessed with speed, depth is mistaken for dysfunction. Jung warned us of this. He spoke of the individuation process, a lifelong journey of becoming one's true self by integrating both light and shadow. For the intuitive introvert, this path is steep, because they often suppress their gifts just to survive the shallowness around them. With the very shadow, they suppress those strange dreams, those uncanny insights, those unspoken truths may hold the key to their power. Okay? And this is where ancient wisdom and modern science meet. In Sufi psychology, for instance, the soul has layers, nafs, kalb, ra. The intuitive introvert lives closer to the kalb and reabsorbing not just words, but the energy behind them. But without guidance or understanding, this sensitivity becomes a burden. A beautiful mind collapses under the weight of its own awareness. The curse, then, is not the trait. It is the isolation that comes with it. But what does that isolation do to a life? That is what we will explore next. Imagine moving through the world with a radar always on. You are not just listening to what people say. You are hearing what they do not say. You are not just experiencing events, you are decoding the patterns behind them. You feel joy more deeply, yes, but you also feel sorrow, confusion, dissonance, sad a volume others cannot hear. This is the emotional world of the intuitive introvert. And over time, it creates invisible consequences. Because when you live in constant perception, yet rarely find understanding, you begin to hide. You begin to dim the parts of yourself that no one affirms. You simplify your speech, censor your depth, pretend you do not notice what you absolutely do. It is like speaking in metaphors while everyone else talks in bullet points. Relationships become a dance of restraint. You may long for connection, for that soul-level meeting of minds, but you often feel too intense, or worse, invisible. You pick up on every subtle cue, a flicker of disinterest, a shift in tone, an emotional truth someone does not want to face. And when you speak it out loud, they say you are too sensitive, too serious, too much. So you start withholding, editing, silencing. But here lies the paradox. The more you silence your inner world, the more isolated you feel, And the more isolated you feel, the more that world grows heavier, more unshared, until one day it becomes unbearable. This is often the point where intuitive introverts begin to collapse inward. Some retreat into chronic solitude, telling themselves they prefer it when in truth, they have just lost hope in being truly seen. Others overcompensate, forcing extroversion, draining themselves to meet the world on its terms, only to burn out with no language for their pain. Some fall into depression, anxiety, or existential fatigue. Not because they are weak, but because they are carrying too much truth without enough space to express it. Career-wise, this curse plays out in subtler but equally tragic ways. In fast-paced environments, intuitive introverts are often overlooked. They do not market themselves. They take time to process. They value meaning over metrics, agents, but meaning rarely wins meetings. They may have breakthrough insights, systems, level thinking, long-range vision, emotional intelligence, but in a world that rewards speed and surface, these gifts go unseen. In creative fields, they can thrive if they are supported, but without mentorship, they often second-guess their work, paralyze under perfectionism, or get lost in inner critique. Because their standard is not approval, it is authentic resonance. And that is a rare thing to find in a noisy, click-driven world. And, socially, it can be a lonely path. At gatherings, they are the ones in the corner, observing, rather than performing. They may dread small talk, but yearn for real talk. They are slow to warm up, but once they trust you, the bond is deep and lifelong. Yet because they are rarely the loudest in the room, they are often the last to be invited. Understood as aloof when they are simply overwhelmed. Misread as cold when they are burning inside. There is a kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from being unseen, even when surrounded by others. From having oceans of perception inside you unrealizing most people are swimming in puddles. If you are an intuitive introvert, you know exactly what I mean. You are the one who walks into a room and feels the emotional temperature before anyone says a word. You sense the tension behind smiles, the grief behind humor, the desire hiding inside small talk. Your inner world is layered, profound, vast, but your outer expression, quiet, careful, filtered, tanned. That's right, there's the curse. This is not simply a story of introversion. It is not just about shyness or social fatigue. This is about the unique burden carried by those who both feel deeply and think symbolically. Those who do not just process facts, but live within meaning. To those who, as Carl Jung said, are drawn to the inner world to dreams, archetypes, and invisible truths. Because when your mind is wired to explore the depths, the surface often feels like a lie. But the world, more often than not, lives on the surface. This script is a journey into that disconnect, a psychological exploration, a historical unearthing, A modern reflection. Why does it feel like intuitive introverts are out of place in this age of noise and immediacy? Why does solitude feel sacred, but relationships feel suffocating? K. Why do intuitive minds often burn out, break down, or disappear? We will not answer these questions we will answer them with ancient wisdom and modern science, with stories both personal and philosophical, with Jungian archetypes, historical parallels, and psychological truths that still ripple through every intuitive soul today. Because this is not a weakness to be fixed. It is a tension to be understood, a gift that hides its own shadow. And here is the strange twist. Throughout history, intuitive introverts have been the mystics, the philosophers, the poets, the revolutionaries. They were often dismissed in life, but canonized in death, misunderstood in their time, but honored in history. From Carl Jung himself, locked in decades of inner dialogue, to Sufi poets like Rumi, who turned isolation into cosmic connection. From solitary monks who mapped the soul to modern thinkers who quietly redefined consciousness, the pattern is ancient. The curse is known, and still, it repeats. So let us walk into this mystery together, because to understand the intuitive introvert is not just to understand a personality type, it's to confront a deeper truth about how society fears the quiet mind, and why that mind may be its only salvation. To understand the curse of the intuitive introvert, we must go back, not just decades, but centuries, because this is not a new affliction of the digital age. It is a wound stitched into the soul of human history. What we now call introversion and intuition are modern psychological terms, refined and systematized by thinkers like Carl Jung in the early 20th century. But their essence, quiet depth, inner knowing, solitude, and the perception of invisible truths has existed long before we had names for them. The intuitive introvert has always been present in every culture, sometimes as a sage, sometimes as an outcast, sometimes as both. In ancient China, the Taoist hermit lived alone in the mountains not because he hated society, but because he saw through it. He preferred silence to status, stillness to stimulation. In the Tao Te Ching, Laozi writes, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." These words echo the intuitive introvert's daily experience, holding deep truths they rarely voice, sensing things others refuse to see. In medieval Islamic culture, the Sufi mystics withdrew from worldly power to chase divine union. They were ecstatic poets and quiet wanderers, dancing not in public parades, but within the inner sanctum of the heart. Figures like Al-Ghazali and Rabia Basri left behind conventional success for the mystery of the soul. They were intuitive introverts before the term existed, questioning reality, resisting conformity, valuing essence over image. In the West, too, this archetype appears. The desert fathers of early Christianity, the solitary monks of the medieval era, the melancholy philosophers of the Enlightenment. Blaise Pascal, for instance, once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. But what of those who can? What of those who crave that room, yet are punished for preferring it?" The Renaissance gave birth to brilliant minds like Leonardo da Vinci, deeply introverted, intensely intuitive. He filled notebooks with mirror-scripted ideas that no one read during his lifetime. His genius was not loud. It was not fast. It was not easily digested by the society of his time. And that is a pattern worth noticing. Throughout history, intuitive introverts have often been misjudged because their value is not immediately visible. Particularly, they are rarely charismatic performers. They are slow thinkers in a fast world. They feel the pulse of the collective psyche while the crowd chases the noise of the moment. And because they do not fit into the usual mold, corporate, social, religious, or otherwise, they are often left out of the very conversations they could have illuminated. Carl Jung saw this clearly. His model of psychological types was a revolutionary attempt to honor the diversity of human minds. In his framework, intuition is the function that grasps meaning, potential, and symbolism beneath the surface of reality. Introversion, meanwhile, is the inward flow of energy preferring the inner world to the outer. Put them together, okay, and you get a rare psychological profile. Someone who is not only withdrawn from the external, but also driven to find inner truth. Someone who looks at the world, not as it is, but as it could be. This person is both visionary and misunderstood, deeply wise and profoundly lonely. In ancient mythology, this figure appears as the seer, the oracle, the hermit. In the tarot deck, the hermit card shows an old man holding a lantern, his light not meant to shine on the world, but to guide himself through the dark. This is the intuitive introvert, carrying light, but walking alone. But there is a darker side to this archetype, because societies, especially fast-moving, extrovert-dominated ones often label such people as strange, difficult, aloof, or even broken. The Western world, in particular, has long glorified the man of action over the man of thought, the entrepreneur over the mystic, the soldier over the poet. Even today, success is measured by how visible you are, how many followers, how many likes, how many rooms you command. But what if your gift is not performance? What if your truth is soft-spoken? The ancient world may have made space for these types: monasteries, temples, sacred groves, but today's world leaves little room for stillness. Even in education, children who daydream, reflect, or prefer solitude are often labeled as inattentive or antisocial. In workplaces, those who hesitate to self-promote are overlooked, even if their insights could transform an entire system. In relationships, intuitive introverts often feel too much, say too little, and find themselves exhausted by expectations they cannot meet. This is the curse. Even family dynamics can be fraught. The intuitive introvert may be the strange one, the quiet sibling, the child who spent too much time alone. Their questions made people uncomfortable. Their emotions ran too deep. Their needs were not loud, but they were vast, and when those needs went unmet, they did not rebel, turned inward. They started writing, drawing, dreaming, building an inner world safer than the outer one. But over time, that inner world can become a prison. Because what is the use of seeing beauty, meaning, and truth if you feel you cannot share it with anyone? Jung once said that the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of the parent. But the greatest burden an intuitive introvert often carries is the unexpressed life of the self. They know they are different, not better, not broken, just built for something deeper. But without a framework for that difference, without a language for that depth, they can grow up believing they are defective, when really they are gifted in ways society has not yet learned to nurture. And here is the deepest tragedy. Many of the world's visionaries, healers, and thought leaders have this wiring. But unless they understand and protect it, they often never become who they are meant to be. They adapt. So how do we help the intuitive introvert come out of hiding, not to perform, but to express, not to be louder, but to be heard, not to shrink their nature, but to honor it? That is the path we now turn toward. This section is not a list of quick fixes. It is a quiet offering, a gathering of practices drawn from modern psychology, ancient wisdom, and lived experience that can help you protect your sensitivity, express your truth, and build a life that fits your inner architecture. 1. Honor the sacred solitude. Make solitude a practice, not an escape. Claim a corner of your day to sit in silence. No distractions, just your breath, your thoughts, your body. Even 10 minutes a day can transform you. This is a space where your intuition speaks the loudest when the world goes quiet. In Sufi tradition, this is called Khalwa, spiritual retreat into silence, not to run from the world, but to return to it more whole. You are not retreating, you are remembering. Your thoughts are vast, symbolic, and often difficult to articulate. Journaling helps you untangle the knots. Use free writing. Let your stream of consciousness flow without editing. Okay? Then pause and read it like a message from your subconscious. Carl Jung practiced this through what he called active imagination, a process of writing or drawing from deep within, letting symbols rise without judgment. You may be surprised by what you already know. Intuitive introverts are natural creators, but perfectionism, fear of exposure, or self-doubt often stops them. Make art, write poetry, record voice notes, paint symbols, dance slowly in your room. Not for fame, not for followers, but to give your inner world a voice. Okay? If you do not express your inner truth, it will turn inward and become anxiety. Expression is not luxury, it is oxygen. Even if no one sees it, you do. And that matters. Use tarot cards, study mythology, explore dream interpretation, read Sufi poetry or Jung's man in his symbols. Learn the language your soul already speaks. This creates an inner roadmap, a sense of orientation in the fog of your perception. You do not need a crowd. You need one or two souls who see you. These are rare, but one such bond can heal years of misunderstanding. 6. Protect your energy with rituals. Use rituals. Light a candle before a hard conversation. Cleanse your space after social events. Meditate before entering a chaotic room. Close your eyes between transitions. You are not weak for needing these things. You are a sensitive instrument. You cannot tune into truth if you are flooded by noise. Honor your energy as sacred, because it is. Many intuitive introverts carry unconscious shame. I am too much. I am not normal. I am too quiet. I am too sensitive. Shame comes from misalignment, not brokenness. Your environment, not your essence, may be what caused the pain. Begin to rewrite the inner script. Replace shame with curiosity. Okay? Replace hiding with honesty. 8. Integrate. Do not escape. You do not need to disappear to be safe. You need to weave your inner world into the outer one. Practice speaking your truth, even awkwardly. Practice naming your feelings, even if your voice shakes. Practice stepping out, not to perform, but to participate. As Jung taught, individuation is the journey of becoming whole, not perfect, whole. And wholeness includes your silence, your insight, your strangeness, your softness. Kata, nothing needs to be cut away. Everything belongs. So, here we are. Because in truth, it is a sacred paradox. You see, the intuitive introvert is not broken. They are simply tuned to a different frequency. One that this noisy world often forgets, but desperately needs. Yes, you feel too much, okay? But it means you notice beauty where others are blind. Yes, you think in symbols and metaphors, while others think in checklists and steps. But it means you can see what is becoming, not just what is. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. For intuitive introverts, this is not an easy path, but it is a path of profound power, because once you stop editing yourself to be understood, you begin to live in alignment. And from that place, you do not need permission. You do not need validation. You just need stillness, honesty, and time. History remembers the quiet ones, not for their noise, but for their vision. This is your work now, to change who you are, but to trust who you are. Not to hide your truth, but to protect it, nurture it, and share it in the way only you can. You are not lost. You are deep. The path of the intuitive introvert is not a straight line. It spirals, it circles, it dives into the depths before it surfaces with wisdom, and that is its strength. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, unheard, or unseen, pause. Breathe. Remember, you are not here to swim in the shallows. You are here to walk through the forest of the unseen, to light your lantern and look within, and maybe, just maybe, to help others do the same. 'Cause this world will always reward the loud. but it is the quiet ones who will save it. If you finally found words for what you have carried alone for years, you are not alone. We explored the hidden architecture of the soul through psychology, history, spirituality, and lived experience. Not to perform, not to entertain, okay, but to remember who we are. This is a place for intuitive thinkers, for deep feelers, for the ones who have always sensed there is more beneath the surface and who are finally ready to name it. So, if you are ready to keep going, subscribe. Join us. For those whose strength was always in their softness, whose depth was always mistaken for darkness. There will be more like this, explorations into the psyche, reflections on history's quiet visionaries, and tools to help you live not louder, but truer, because healing does not always come in a roar. Sometimes it comes in a whisper, and sometimes that whisper is enough to begin everything. So if you are ready to stop apologizing for your depth, can take the next step with us.